Okay, so for today we are going to do a fabric tumbler. I have this really pretty cotton of succulents. So pretty, and it's just so vibrant and simple, if that makes sense. So I have this cup that I spray painted this morning. You can see a couple spots that are jacking up on me because it was really weird this morning, but because of the color being so dark, that's not going to be visible through this. If we were doing a white fabric like the Rainbow Bright tumbler that I've done before, not as a tutorial, but as a purchase, order, custom order, that makes all the difference. So I just have Mod Podge. It really doesn't matter which one you use. It can be matte or shiny, because once you put your epoxy over it, it's going to shine right back up. So I just cut the most of this cup down so that I have a good dipper. If I was using a really long handled brush, I would just use the whole size cup. It was one of these size. This was epoxy on here, but if I was using a tall brush, then great. But since I'm using this Mod Podge brush, it's actually still wet from the last time I used it, which is really bad that I forgot to take it in the house and wash it off, but it's still wet. So we are going to put a nice layer of Mod Podge on there. You know what? I'm going to put this on a noodle. I'll put something more secure on there at some point, but for now I just need this turning capability. So we are going to coat this nice and evenly. You want it completely coated so that your fabric adheres properly, but you don't want this coat so thin that it dries before you can get your fabric on there. I prefer doing skinny tumblers for my fabrics because I really don't have any fabrics that have like a four-way stretch. I have some knits and those might be okay, but there are some fabrics that are just ideal stretchability for doing fabrics, but I don't have any of those. I have yet to spend the money just yet. There are a couple of cuts that I wouldn't mind getting in the near future. I think the website, it's like a Shopify website called Creations by Nell. I'm pretty sure that's the website or the shop name. Anyways, I've just got a nice little layer on here. And I'm just going to go over it one more time. I haven't really made a dent in this Mod Podge, but that's okay. So I'm just going to set it aside for the moment. So I'm going to lay down my fabric just as straight as I can. And I've cut this a little too big on purpose because we're going to go over it. Pretty sure the pool noodle that I just put on here is going to backfire. It's a little too small. So you just want to kind of lay it down flat, work out any of the wrinkles and creases that you get. You can kind of feel the Mod Podge coming through. That's okay. The reason I like these skinny tumblers is because of that right there. You just don't have as much taper to deal with. That really sucks that I cut that just a little too small. I'm gonna see if I can stretch that just a hair. Oh my goodness. I couldn't have done any better on that. Good gravy. So what I'm gonna do is let this dry a bit, and then there's a little paint drip underneath there. So I'm gonna let this dry just a bit, and then go over this area right here and right there with Mod Podge. Actually, I need to do that right now, because we want to be able to, I'm gonna lay those strings down a little flatter with the grain there. We're gonna make it where it will cut with a blade so much better. If I overlap them, that might work since this is a darker material, but you'll see that seam right there where that, I gotta work on staying on camera. That seam right there will show all the way up to right there. We do not want that. So I'm just going to kind of make that like that. Go ahead and go over it that way, and then I'm gonna pull it right back off. I haven't done a ton of tumblers with fabric colored maybe I need a margarita. I promise I haven't been drinking. I haven't done a ton of fabric tumblers, so I'm definitely not a pro, but these are just the steps that I take. Now I'm gonna pull that back because I do not want that drying on top of it. It will not be pretty because I need it to just get stiff. So since that's kind of just hanging out in limbo, I'm gonna go ahead and go around as much of this as I can get to without making that flap close. We don't want it to close and get glued down. I'm just going to kind of make my way around it. Yep, I'm going to speed this part up for just a bit. Okay, so I've gone all over it. So one of the tricks to getting the seam straight not only is to have that double glued so that it can be stiff and easy to cut, but another trick is to actually pull this back, because I can use this as a guide to know exactly where to cut the good side of the fabric, because I've got definite raw edge here. That's okay. I'm gonna let this dry just like that. I'm gonna turn it over so the two flaps don't overlap each other, because I don't want them touching while they dry. I'm going to enlist the use of one of my empty turner spaces for the moment, and I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm going to come back and overlap this and then kind of just cut it with the X-Acto. If everything goes well, right across, and we'll have a nice clean seam. So like I said, I'm going to open up these flaps just a little bit more, and flaps sounds so terrible, but that's essentially what they are. So I'm going to put this on the turner, let it dry, and we'll get back to it in a minute. Okay, so this is pretty dry. It's nice and stiff. So this was on the bottom, and it definitely has some kind of rougher strings. So I'm just going to kind of smooth that up just a bit. You do not want that kind of sticking up, making a weird lump right there at your seam. So make sure and have your X-Acto ready. And we are going to put the bottom over the top. That barely touches. Luckily, I'm going to put glitter here and here. So we are going to take our X-Acto knife and very slowly go right down that line. Literally right there. It's okay if it overlaps a tiny bit, but you don't want a huge overlap, because I actually had one the other day that I didn't realize was totally going to show through. But the end result here, if I was cutting this deep enough, and I'm not, I'm gonna have to go back over it again. I almost had it. I'm gonna just go back over my little line right here where I can see where I was cutting it. Hold it nice and straight, but the end result, you'll end up with a little flap right there that you can pretty much just peel right up. That's not perfectly smooth, but as long as I don't have any gaps, I'm in good shape. I can always trim, but I can't not put back. This little cradle that I have this on is intended for decal application, so you can lay your cup there and kind of have something instead of trying to put it in your lap. So make sure you have a nice sharp pair of scissors. I've got my little Ginger scissors here that my family got me for Christmas a few years ago. Just kind of ease that up. So now I'm gonna try to tuck this under. I almost didn't leave that enough. So I'm gonna Mod Podge this again, and I'm gonna go down first there and then tuck this over it, since this one has a little bit more raw edge. I'm not worried about this little stuff hanging over the end right now. That's kind of the least of our worries. But I have my little pool of Mod Podge, and I'm gonna have to take my brush in and wash it tonight because it's gonna be a little too icky after this. So I'm gonna take a little bit of Mod Podge, put it down right here on the bottom, and lay that down. Then I'm going to Mod Podge right over it. I have seen some people Mod Podge the edge that's going to either go on top or bottom first and then cut it and then work with that. It's personal preference. Whatever works for you, as long as it gets you the same result. It's just as good if you have a way of cutting it nice and straight. Okay. One of the downfalls of leaving it peeled back like that is it kind of puts a little wave sometimes that you gotta work with. Like I said, I've only done a few fabric tumblers. I'm not an expert. So I learn as I go. I learn from each mistake, I feel like. Try to anyways. All right, so I'm gonna squeeze a little bit underneath this side now. Just go right on top, and then I'm gonna push it down in just a second. So I think I'm gonna put this really pretty, it's called Cora, glitter with it. It has kind of a bluish purple cast, and it really makes me think of that right there, that whatever kind of succulent that is. I think it'll be a nice little complementary color. I think green would be too much green, but I think that purple on the top and bottom would just be really, really pretty. And I just want to lay that down, and it's not wanting to lay down. So there we go. Yep. So any little minor bumps in here are going to be camouflaged when you epoxy it. But if you have a serious lift right here, like I've got going on, it will not camouflage it. It will look like your fabric is coming up right there. And that's not something that we want. So I'll probably wait just a couple minutes while this kind of gets a little bit more tacky and push down on it repetitively. Just like right there too. It's not a super straight seam, but I think once I get this, probably do about an inch here and about an inch here, it'll be a little less visible. If I was doing a name, I prefer to go lengthwise right there. Put it right in between the two bands of glitter. It's the perfect camouflage. All right, that's about all I can do for tonight. This has to be completely dry before you do epoxy. But you do not do epoxy until you have Mod Podge on here like your life depends on it. So I am going to, while I've got the time, or while I've got the opportunity and my brush is already wet, I'm going to go ahead and add my layer of Mod Podge. For some reason that's wobbly. I think it's because I have epoxy on my desktop here that it's making my turner and my little brace there kind of teeter-totter. Kind of annoying. So put this on nice and thick. Try and avoid lines, just because every great once in a while that might peekaboo through there. Right here you can kind of see that's lifting up just a little bit. I'm going to continue to push that down. Ooh, that's even better than my finger. That's perfect. That's probably not going to lay down as good as I want it to right there, just because I think I've got a little strand right underneath it, but under epoxy it won't show. If it was a big giant lump, we'd have a different conversation, but I think it'll be fine. Man, I love this fabric so much. I've had this for probably 2 years. I wanted to make a wallet out of it because I do that also. Not as frequently now that I've started doing the cups. But I think this would make such a pretty wallet. And I've got a couple other little succulent, maybe one other succulent fabric to go with it. It's a really pretty blue, kind of smooth cactus, whatever they're called. I really wish I knew what it is. Kind of smooth like that, but blue. Different plant though. I love the photoreal fabrics that you can get at the fabric stores. This one came from Joann's. That's where I get a good chunk of my stuff. I have a hard time stomaching paying really, really high prices. Like Spoonflower has some amazing prints, and I know that the people that designed it get a little bit of that. A tiny little bubble right there. Hopefully that will hide under the epoxy. I know the artists get a little bit, but it's just, I guess the way they do things, the process is just so expensive. You definitely want to seal this. Like I said, act like your life depends on it. If you don't seal it, I see so many posts of ruined cups because if you don't seal it properly, the epoxy will get underneath it and make wet looking spots. Some fabrics, that's going to be a glaring issue. Some fabrics, you probably wouldn't notice it very much unless somebody pointed it out. Most of the time, I would imagine that you're not going to be able to hide it with vinyl. Especially on something like this one. I don't really plan on putting a vinyl decal on here because just for this craft show setup, I gotta leave it nice and generic, and it's at a church, so I can't put anything like "don't be a prick" or anything like that on here because that's not exactly churchy. And it's my church and I love it. I haven't been in a bit, but we moved and it's so far away. But I definitely want to stay in good graces because you never know when you Might have to go back. And I love all the ladies in the ministry there, so it's easy to stay in the loop even if I haven't been attending regular. So that's all I'm going to do for now. I'll probably go ahead and do one more layer of Mod Podge before I seal this. I'm super paranoid, just like I did on my wood grain. I seal this with Mod Podge like crazy, and then after that is 100% dry. I'll probably leave it a full 24 hours since I have plenty of time on this one. Probably leave it 24 hours and then I'll spray seal it. But before we do the next layer of Mod Podge, I'll show you how to cut right there. You want to cut off this extra. You can do it with scissors, but there's an easy way to do it with a blade. Usually I use popsicle sticks. So kind of makes it really, really smooth. Just kind of flattening that down right there. It's not perfect, but that's okay. Yeah, so that's all I'm going to do tonight. Okay, so I've only got one Mod Podge layer on here for now, but I'm going to go ahead and show you how to trim your fabric right here, top and bottom. That is ridiculously peeling. I don't know what's going on with that. So to make it easier to rotate, I'm going to just trim this excess right here. Doesn't have to be pretty because we're about to actually get a little bit more aggressive with it and use the straight blade. It's easier to get a nice clean edge when you have Mod Podge on here. It's like, remember back in the day when you used something called stiff stuff? That's how you made your bows stand up, because it was before you could really get a lot of wire and stuff like that, or you'd make those cheesecloth ghosts. Anyways, it makes me think of my grandma. But so I've got the excess off of there. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. I don't want it super jacked up, of course, but makes it a little easier to spin it around if it's not too bad. Okay, so that's all I'm going to do here. I'm going to grab, this is the most Southern engineered thing probably ever. I'm going to grab my popsicle sticks that I have taped together. Okay, so I have these little popsicle sticks that I just taped together. Just electrical tape, nothing super fancy. And there's this. It is probably the most Southern engineered thing ever. But I have 3 different height options in that one thing. There is a cup tool out there that I've heard amazing things about, that it is a silicone base and then you can adjust with these rings and all of that. But I have yet to invest in one because I don't do a lot of fabric cups, but I may invest in one in the near future. So what I'm going to do, I want it a little higher up. Not super high, but I don't want it so far to the curve there. So I've got it 3 popsicle sticks deep. So I'm going to hold this right here. Turn it this way. I'm going to stand up and do this. Turn it so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to hold and press, and I kind of have to hold the blade still as well. But just rotate your cup. I think the nice thing about that silicone tool with the blade is that it probably rotates much smoother than what I've got here. And it's okay that my paint is chipping off, because I can either go over it with acrylic beforehand or whatever. I mean, ideally I wouldn't want it to come off, but that's okay. It's not the end of the world with this cup. So, just going to rotate a couple times around. The blades get dull pretty quick when you're cutting it up against metal, or cutting against the metal. So it's probably time for me to replace this one. Who knows? So start over here where your seam is. I totally double scored it. Double score is not a good thing in this particular case. like it would be almost anywhere else. Also have to watch for the blade tilting like it was just trying to do. But now I can pretty much feel, there it is. This is the ugliest rim I've probably ever done. But for this purpose, it's okay. I don't need this to be perfect because I don't have, for what I'm using it for, it doesn't have to be completely clean. Now, if that was my exposed edge, I would be in so much trouble. It would be not good. But I'm actually going to cover that with glitter. I've done a couple of them. I like putting glitter at the bottom here and glitter at the top there because I feel like it hides that right there for that very reason. So I've got to kind of go back down right there. I'm going to go back down. Okay, that's good enough for this particular purpose. I'm going to actually grab a different blade to do the top because this one is clearly just a little bit too worn down. So I'm going to grab a different blade for the next one just to make it a little bit easier. Okay, so my pack of blades is MIA. So I guess I'll have to go buy more. So I'm going to move this down just a little bit. I don't need a very big lip at all. So I'm going to just do it. Maybe I'm going to do it this way. I think I was pushing too hard on that blade. And it just was lifting or bowing down. I think that was the problem. What the heck? I don't know what's up with that. There we go. I don't know what was going on with my blade right then, but it was not playing nice. And once again, it's lifting up. This is really starting to tick me off, but you get the point. If you plan on doing a lot of fabric tumblers, maybe invest in that tool. Like I said, I don't have one. I don't do very many of these. But if I do start to do more, I will absolutely be investing in that tool. Luckily, this doesn't have to be perfect. I just need it off of there. I personally like to do a layer of epoxy over. This is just not working in my favor tonight. No matter what I'm doing, nothing is working. I personally like to do a layer of epoxy over because I've had cups in the past that I went ahead and did the glitter layer, and you could see a ridge, and it was really hard to recover from that. I had to really work at it to get it nice and clean and smooth edges. I should have just done this to begin with because it doesn't have to be perfectly straight. I just want something that completely seals my fabric. Okay, let's see how that turned out. Okay, that's pretty good. So I'm going to probably go ahead and clean off the rest of this spray paint and then Mod Podge again. Top to bottom, I'm going to Mod Podge it. I've already got my brush washed and ready. Got my little cup ready here to make a little reservoir. So I'm going to go ahead and scrape off the rest of that because I really don't need it. It's really there primarily to make the fabric colors pop if you have a lighter fabric. And while I'm at it, I'm going to see if I can't pick off the glitter chunks that somehow ended up in there last night. It's not chunks, it's just a little bit. But anyway, so I'm gonna get that cleaned up and I'll be back for the next step in just a second. Okay, so I decided that the glitter that I plan on pairing with this may not be dark enough to cover any jagged lines. So I went ahead and painstakingly scraped off all the paint, and then I went ahead and scored with this and then went around it freehand like I did earlier. But on this time, what I did is I used a couple of my little glitter sample things, and I just kind of braced it like this and then did that and scored it, and then went back and did that. And then on the bottom one, I just added a third one and did the exact same thing. Just kind of did that where the tip only is sticking out right there, and blah, 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 all the way around. So I just got through scraping all of the paint off. There's just a couple little flakes that I'll get in just a little bit. But I'm going to Mod Podge this. I want to go all the way past that edge right there because I want to truly seal that as best as possible. First, I've got to get off a couple of little paint flecks and glitter flecks that have kind of jumped on there. But I'm going to Mod Podge this and then pick it back up tomorrow. So just wanted to show that update of what I did just now, since that is not what I had just said on the last clip that I was going to do. But again, I'm pretty sure that the glitter I'm going to use will not camouflage that. So I will get back to that as soon as all the Mod Podge dries. Okay, so we have let this completely dry. This was the last thing I did, the Mod Podge, just a second ago, in video time, obviously. I am going to tape off my edges so that I can create a nice sharp rim for the glitter that I'm gonna do. And I'm gonna use my lovely assistant, my turner, to hold my cup while I do this. So I'm gonna go right below my fabric line. Right there. You can kind of see the fabric poking through. And I'm just going to slowly turn it and make sure that I'm staying lined up like I need it to. I usually do this by hand, and it is a huge pain in the butt. So I'm thinking that I'm going to use my turner from now on, because that was so easy. I'm almost done already. I know that this is pretty stinking even all the way around because of the way I cut it with the little support underneath the blade and scored it and then straightened it up from there. So I've got it nice and overlapped right there. I don't want any kind of epoxy leak, so I'm gonna like use my fingernail. Sorry about that. I'm gonna use my fingernail to kind of go right up against that edge, because you can kind of see right there, this is where it's overlapping. I want it right there. And a lot of times I'll go ahead and do a layer of epoxy over this and then go and do my bands for my glitter, but I really don't feel like I need to on this one, so I'm not gonna. So I'm gonna snip that just a bit. I like to make a little flap because we do not want this on here forever. And we don't want to be fighting it and messing with it, so we're going to be able to have just our little flap, just like that. So now we do the same. Sorry about this. I am trying to figure out the best way for my recording on this, just because it's a phone and I'm trying to watch and trying to line up. Try not to make it obnoxious. So when I do this, I'm going to actually kind of sprinkle a little bit after I lift the tape. I'm probably going to let it kind of spread just a little bit, because I don't always want a super sharp line. I made myself a Rainbow Bright cup, and it kind of fades down from the top and up from the bottom. It's pretty cute. But the clean lines look really sharp as well. So once again, I'm gonna do that. Kind of make that it's not really showing like I want it to. You can kind of see that line right there where I've kind of filled in that little crease. That way epoxy doesn't go underneath there. I've had that happen before and I had to go clean it up with a blade, which isn't the biggest deal, except for when you've got fabric and stuff and then you're scratching it up with a blade. You really don't want to do that, because if you create any little break in the seal, it can make your cup ugly. Get you those weird dark spots. So I've got that on there. This is our seam, so I'm actually going to go ahead and run my fingernail along there. Just like that. I've got a little bit of a fray right there, but that's okay. It's not super duper noticeable. Just about every one of my videos has a screw up moment, and just about every one of my cups has at least one tiny flaw, just because I'm human. I'm not perfect, and I don't want to stress about it. Most people that buy my stuff appreciate the whole handmade concept, so they are not stressed about tiny imperfections. I'm usually way harder on myself, just like I'm sure pretty much everyone else is. We're harder on ourselves. And I have changed my mind. I'm going to do Periwinkle. It's really hard to show in the video, but this blue is so pretty against this, and that's what I really want it to pop against, is that this has so much blue and purple, and this has blue, but it's purple at the right angle. In the video it looks like lilac, I think, but that there, it's gonna be great. So I'm gonna mix up some epoxy. I've got it warming up because it's still really cold here. I don't like it. I'm a spring kind of girl. So I'm gonna mix up some epoxy and then I'll show you what we do next. Okay, so I've mixed up a little bit of epoxy. I did a little bit more than I intended to, but I might end up being able to put it in a keychain mold or something. So we are going to put a thin layer all the way around here. It's okay if it overlaps the tape just a little bit. You don't want it out here. And then we're going to put a little bit here and on the bottom. And then I'm going to sprinkle it with the glitter. So just nice and thin. Even though that is incredibly thin, that's probably still way too much. But I'm going to let it swirl around here. I'm going to scoop some of it back up. About as thin as you can get it. If it's too thick, I've said this in a couple of other videos and actually shown it, because I got some really thick spots on a couple of the tutorials I did, thicker than I was intending. So if you get it too thick, your glitter will literally just kind of soak right in, and it just looks like almost like wet sand, you could say. And you just have to keep on adding more and more and more glitter to it to kind of camouflage that spot. So once again, I'm just going up to the tape here. Don't want it thick. I also want to watch for any spots that look like maybe they're repelling away from the stainless, because since I've handled this a bit, even though I try and wash my hands right before I come out here to do stuff, it still gets oily, just stuff. It happens. So I'm going to kind of put, whoa, that's way too much. We're going to be squeegeeing a good bit of this off. But I have to pay close attention to the edge right there. I feel like it always separates right there. Just kind of swirling that around, making sure it's not too thick. I don't really see any spots that are repelling. This particular cup has kind of a weird shaped bottom. It's kind of like a graduate and then has a little blip right in the middle. This is a 30-ounce skinny from Hog, or Stainless Steel Depot, Hog brand. I've ordered from them a couple times. It's alright. Haven't had anything bad to say from anyone I've ever bought from. I've ordered from Franz. I've ordered from Sass & Crafts, Yaya's. Then I have another glitter that was a gift, and I don't remember I think it's maybe Tanya's Glitter Lab. I don't remember. I'll use it in another video, and I'll definitely post it. But there are so many suppliers. I know a lot of them maybe get them from the same suppliers, but not all. Not all glitter is created equal. So, got that on there. I'm going to catch my fall off here because I want to reuse anything possible that falls off. So just kind of pour it nice and thick. I got a little blob of epoxy on my turner arm, so I'm going to have a nice little glitter epoxy nubbin on there. So we're going to let that kind of rotate around. Let that kind of soak in a minute. I'll go back over it to get any oil slick spots. So just go all the way up to over the tape just a little bit. That way you don't accidentally end up with a bare spot. Normally I like to have my cups base painted. That just didn't pan out with this one. I think the weather, we had some storms, some rain, some cold. Then it was like 70. Texas has a lot of mood swings. All right, so we're gonna let that go for a minute, and then we'll do the bottom in just a second. I do my bottoms kind of funny. On another video I said it's kind of like flinging hay with a pitchfork, which is kind of country, but it's pretty true. All right, so that is good there. So I like to use my little spatula from my Cricut tools. It's like everything my dreams are made out of sometimes. It has epoxy and glitter on the back of it. I have a clean one that I actually use when I'm peeling up vinyl, but this is my glitter spatula. So I'm going to kind of fling that right on the bottom. I hope I got it thin enough, because that last video I did of glitter, oh my goodness, the black and gold. If you haven't seen the ombre video, I'm pretty proud of that one. It does have a couple of spots that I had to go back and fix, but overall, that ombre turned out pretty good. Probably one of my better ones. Ombres are so hard when you have two completely different colors. Mine was gold and black. Some colors ombre really well, like orange, pink, blue, green, stuff like that. Black and gray. All right, so I feel like I've got that coated pretty good. I'm gonna let this turn for a minute, and then I'm gonna come back to it, and let's go ahead and give it a little attention up here. It seems like it's covered pretty good. This is a bigger cut too, so I don't feel like it has that same soak-in effect as a smaller cut tends to have. And maybe it's just the way it sparkles, it doesn't look that way. Ah! But that's what it feels like anyways. So, one more time over here. I'll just go ahead and give it a little love while we're at it. I'm making a huge mess. Oh my goodness. That's alright, it's my she shed. So, I don't have to worry about anybody getting mad that it's all over the kitchen or anything. Although, I do still find glitter everywhere in the house. Even in my coffee the other day. And I hadn't even been doing anything out here yet. I've got one little spot on the bottom that seems lacking. All right, now I mean it. I'm done for 30 minutes. I'm done. In 30 minutes, I'm gonna set a timer. And then I'm going to set it for 25 because that gives me time to get my hiney out here if I'm in the middle of something else. So I'm just going to let this be. We're going to let it spin and then come take off the tape. It needs time to set a bit because if you do it too soon, it makes it real, like the edges kind of oozy, not real sharp. If you pull it off too late, it literally will you'll have to cut it off if it's really, really in there. And then whenever all that's cured, I'm actually going to brush off any of this that got on the fabric part because I did not really want it all over this part, but I kind of had a little spatula acrobatics, I guess. So we'll be back in 30 minutes. Okay, so this has been turning for about 35 minutes now. So I am going to peel off the electrical tape, but I'm actually going to turn off my turner because it's going to go the opposite direction. And well, I can turn that part. It's going to go faster than I want it to because I want to go nice and slow and kind of just peel away on here. So I'm going to turn it off for a second. And we are going to just pick up our little flap right here. And just, I kind of peel it the opposite direction. I don't know if that's like the right way to do it, but that's how I do it. I feel like this is picking up some of my Mod Podge spray, but I'm not real certain on that. If you happen to use your turner, make sure you're not unscrewing your arm like I was just doing, because that could be tragic. I'm not real worried about this little spot right here for the moment because I'm gonna flake it off after everything dries. I'm gonna screw that back in before I end up regretting it. So then we're gonna go down here to the other end. Okay, so I got that lifted. And you're gonna have epoxy on your fingers from touching this tape sometimes. Just kind of depends on how you pick it up and how you're peeling it. But make sure not to accidentally touch your cup with any of your epoxy fingers. So I'm actually gonna leave that with those crisp lines like that. It's really pretty. And it's just over my fabric line, which is exactly what we need. We don't want it so far past it that it makes this obvious ridge on there. That's why I've in the past usually done a layer of epoxy and then done that ring so that I didn't have that real obvious ridge. But this time I cut the fabric where I wanted my glitter rim to be and then put my tape right on that line. So it's pretty great. I wish the picture really did the color justice because it's closer to that color combo in person than it lets you really see on the video. So I'm just going to do this to get anything that's kind of poking off the end there to lay down flat. It's a big pain in the butt whenever it's sticking out of my epoxy later. So that is all for this step. I'm going to let this cure all night. Let it rotate for, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours. Long enough that I'm not paranoid that it's going to let gravity take over. Really, this is so thin that in all reality, you don't really have to spin it. I do. I'm paranoid. I probably do a lot of things that I don't really have to do, like sealing after Mod Podge and all of that, but I'd just rather be one step more cautious than all the steps of redo. So I will be doing epoxy in a little bit, or in the morning, but momentarily. Okay, so I went outside and brushed this off, got all the loose glitter off of here that I could. There is still some on there. I am not going to worry about trying to take that off of there. It's just not worth the hassle, honestly. So I'm going to put something underneath my surface to catch my always going to happen, whether I like it or not, drips. So I have my epoxy mixed. I've got way too much. That's all right because I'm about to do some other stuff with it. I hate wasting epoxy, but I'm not that worried about it. So when I do these, I like to do the middle this way and then do the ends. That way I have less chance of contaminating with any of the loose glitter that I may have missed. So that's what I'm going to do, is start and just kind of go that way, and stop right about there, and then address those. It's probably not going to happen, but that's okay. Better safe than sorry. So I just kind of squeegee mine around. I'm going to go pretty thick. And I do want to try and avoid air bubbles. I did try and avoid air bubbles on mixing this. That's going to be less that I have to use my embossing gun on. Like I said in other videos, some people use a heat torch or an actual torch. Certain epoxies require that. An embossing gun wouldn't touch some of those epoxy bubbles. Depends on the brand. I've not really worked with too many. I've used Alumilite. It was all right. I did notice that it started to kind of discolor a little bit. I'm not really sure if that was just a bad batch or if that's normal. I did a little bit of Promarine for a little while. I didn't mind that at all. And this last time I just grabbed the Envirotex Light because I had a 60 off. And I really like that you can get that big kit at Michael's. What I don't like is when they don't have it and I'm trying to be proactive and not run out. Which was today. I tried to go buy some today because I've been blowing through epoxy pretty quick lately. And they were completely out of stock. Probably because lots of us were taking advantage of getting a whole gallon of the mix kit for 40 bucks. It's a pretty good deal. Kind of caught some drips on there. I love this fabric so much. Got a couple other fabrics I really want to try. I don't know if those will turn into tutorials or not because it gets pretty redundant unless you do something different to it. One trick is to remember to always leave a little bit of your cup that does not have fabric. It's okay to cover it with glitter if you want, but definitely have at least a little bit of rim where the epoxy can kind of seal at the end. I've seen plenty of posts of people that went all the way to the top with it. I actually did it myself on my very first fabric tumbler, and best believe as soon as somebody washed it that didn't know how to take care of it, that bad boy went right into the dishwasher. And had I left a little bit of rim, maybe it would have survived. That's a big maybe because I honestly don't know, because I really sucked at those a year ago. But it's definitely not going to survive if it doesn't have a good seal. That water gets underneath there and it just demolishes it. So I'm just kind of rubbing that up there. I've got this whole thing covered, so I'm going to now do my rim. And after I do this, that'll be the last of this video, because really all I'm going to do after this is epoxy again. Oh my gosh, I'm getting that so far inside the rim. Shoot, I have to fix that. I'm only going to do another layer of epoxy and then sand it if it needs it. If I get this on thick enough, I may go ahead and sand right here at the rim and on the edge down here before I do that second layer of epoxy. I don't like having a ton of cleanup, so I would much rather wipe that out now than to have to go back and fix it. So I've got a pretty decent coverage there. I'll go back over it in just a minute. I'm going to bounce over to this side, and I'm sorry that you can't really see it very well because my big giant hands are in the way. There we go. Maybe that's better. I really do have big hands. That's kind of my nickname at work, is man hands, from the Seinfeld episode of the woman that had just ginormous hands. It's pretty funny. It doesn't bother me at all. I take after my dad, and that was a big dude. I've got that pretty good there. We're going to give this part some attention here. And then in a minute, I'm gonna use a different finger to kind of go over the middle part again. Make sure to cover the bottom. If you don't get the bottom perfectly, this is just not working for me. Once I get a drip down the side there, it just globs right down the side like a leak or something. Anyways, it's just not working for me tonight. Can't be on point every time. So in a minute, I'm going to go back around that little rim there. That is my biggest challenge, is getting that decently smooth. That and the rim. Said it like 6 times already, I think, but it can't be said enough. Kind of watch for any spots that didn't get any. You can kind of catch the light and see from there. All right, so I've got that covered pretty good. Just go around like that. All right, so I'm going to go back over this rim here. Go back over that front top rim just a little bit. I'm going to do just a thin strip. Come on. It's not very cold in here, but it is definitely thicker today than usual. I didn't really have it on the heat lamp for very long before I started mixing it. One bad thing about the she shed with no air conditioning is you sweat like you're in a sauna. But one really great byproduct of that is the fact that I had amazing results with my epoxy. It spread like a dream. So now I'm going to just pour it on a little thicker right in here. And I'm going to blast it with some heat, get those air bubbles out. Just nice and thick so that it kind of covers up that seam right there and any other lumps that may be under the fabric. Like, you know how Mod Podge kind of clumps up sometimes? It's really obnoxious. Normally, when I do my heat gun, I put my mask on. I've had allergic reactions before. If you've watched any of my other videos that I use the heat gun, you'll know. Please use caution. Epoxy definitely is toxic until cured. So I'm going to just blast it with my heat gun to pop some of these bigger bubbles. The micro bubbles aren't really going to be that obvious on this particular cut. I don't see a whole lot of bubbles, period, which is nice. I really hate it whenever I have to just practically scorch my epoxy just to get the glitter, the air bubbles out. Another good thing about heating it up is it just allows it to self-leaven a little bit better. But don't go too crazy with it, because you will scorch if you get too close. I'm probably, other than being off camera, I'm probably about 6 inches away from it. I'll allow it to move at the bottom too, in case there's any spots that need to kind of fill in a little. It helps that. Okay. I don't see any other big bubbles. I see little patches where glitter got where I didn't want it, but I'm really not heartbroken about that. I can address that another time. If I put a decal over it, maybe I'll arrange it over that seam, kind of where it gets that particular area of the unwanted glitter. It's right there. Maybe a hint right there. It's not that bad. I don't mind it being there. I'm not heartbroken, like I said. So that's it. We're going to let this cure. I'll see how thick I ended up getting this before I sand any of that. If you sand it before it's thick enough, you will sand your glitter and it will not be as pretty as what it started out being. So if you have any questions, please drop them in the comments. If you have any suggestions for videos, please let me know. The cup is a 30 ounce from Stainless Steel Depot. The fabric is from Joann's. It's just from their little photo reel section where they have certain more realistic prints. The glitter is Periwinkle from fransglitterandmore.com. And yeah, subscribe so you can see the next videos as they come along. Have a good one.